Welcome to Anything is Possible, the Boston Celtics podcast here on the Athletic Podcast Network. Today's podcast is brought to you by DirecTV Stream. Get your TV together with the best of live and on demand. Learn more at directtv.com. I am your host, Sam Jam Packard, professional sports fan, and I am joined, as always, by the kid, the god, the legend himself, Celtics beat reporter from The Athletic, probable loser in Sunday's great one-on-one matchup between me and him.
There's no chance I'm losing.
Jay King himself, Jay King, who's reportedly 30 pounds overweight and did not look good in his last showing out on the basketball court, but he still has the confidence. Jay, how are you doing today?
I'm looking forward to Sunday because I am going to pummel you in front of whoever shows up to Langone Park at what time is it?
2 p.m.
2 p.m.
Enough time for me to get a win in, then we can all go home and enjoy the Patriots.
Yeah, you're not going to win. It's just not happening.
Bro, I've been hooping against 24-year-olds for the entire summer. I think I can deal with an out-of-shape 39-year-old. I think it's not going to be a big deal.
Good luck.
Well, everyone, you can come out and watch that fun matchup on Sunday. But we're here to talk C's, as we are every week.
You did pick the one park that has the stiffest wind probably in Boston because it's right on the water, and it's a beautiful setting, like beautiful place to play.
I'm an aesthetics guy.
But the breeze is no joke. If it's at all windy that day, shooting will be very, very difficult.
And that is key because I can't shoot. So it's going to be interesting.
How much do you weigh?
185 pounds.
Yeah, I got you by 50 pounds. It's going to be bully ball.
I'm just going to foul you every time. You're just going to plan on posting up?
Yeah, but it doesn't matter because I won't feel your fouls.
Yeah, but I'll just go around you with speed. You have no speed or lateral movement.
I'm far more skilled than you are and will take advantage of you.
You're going to be gassed. But
that's true.
It's really just going to be a battle of wills and endurance. But we do have some news to talk about before we get to. We have some, obviously, I asked for some listener questions. We love listener questions, so we'll get to those. And then we're going to eventually rank where we think the Celtics are in this kind of new beefed up Eastern Conference. But we got some transaction news. We actually have a trade. I don't think it's actually gone through yet, but Trader Brad, guy comes in and is just dealing left and right. He sends Chris Dunn and Carson Edwards to the Grizzlies for Juancho Hernangomez. Jay, what did you think of the deal?
I think it was smart. I don't know if it'll make a huge impact at all on the Celtics next season, but that's the type of player the Celtics needed. They needed a power forward with size to push Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum down a position, and they needed shooting. And if Hernangomez works out, is that how you say it? Hernangomez? I don't know.
Hernangomez? He is from Spain.
Yeah.
Just call him Juancho. It's easier if you just say Juancho.
If Juancho works out, then he'll give them two things that they need, which is size that's not center size and also shooting. And he does not have a great track record. Like,
I was going to say shooting is kind of a questionable.
He was good for like 14 games or whatever it was after he first got traded to the Timberwolves. He showed some promise early in his career with the Nuggets, but like there's not a great track record of him being a viable NBA player. But the Celtics gave up hardly anything. Like Chris Dunn was going to be buried on their depth chart. His body is very iffy at this stage of his career. And Carson Edwards, there's a lot of proof that he's just not an NBA player, at least at this stage of his life. So it's worth doing. And Juancho's deal is only guaranteed for this coming season. So it wasn't a commitment to any long-term salary. So it made sense, even though it may not end up like adding many wins to the Celtics win total. Juancho may not play much, but he's just another option at power forward and another option for shooting.
Yeah, that's the entire crux of the trade, I think, is that the Celtics traded two guys who are not very good for another guy who I don't think is very good, but he's the right size. And he's tall, and like they needed a power forward, and he plays power forward.
He fits the mold.
Yeah, for roster construction purposes, they shuffled around the deep end of their bench, and they just have like everything aligns better now, just in terms of positions. So he is listed at 6'9". He's 240. He's big. He has shot for 14 game stretches of his career. If he can just do anything in terms of being like a stretch four, that's all you want. But I like don't think he played 17 minutes a game last year on the Timberwolves. And the
he was losing
Timberwolves
minutes to some guys who you probably never heard of.
Yeah, the Timberwolves aren't good, and so if you can't get like that much burn from the Timberwolves, I don't know how what hopes you have for the Celtics. But
he has kind of similar excuses to the Celtics for last season. So, and even better excuses, honestly. He was in a movie with Adam Sandler, and he thought that it was going to be like earlier in the offseason than it was. So he ended up missing some offseason workouts. I think he came to training camp not in great shape. Then he got COVID. And so he has a lot of the same excuses the Celtics had last season. Plus, he has the Adam Sandler movie excuse.
Which the movie is coming out. It's not a great excuse, like to say like, oh, I just didn't work out. Like, wasn't he playing basketball in the movie? Did it prohibit him from getting in shape?
Nobody thought that the NBA season was going to start so early. So he probably figured, okay, I'll star in this movie. I don't even know if he's a star in the movie. He'll be in the movie. He'll act in the movie, and then show up to have plenty of time to get in shape for training camp. Then the NBA was like, sorry, bro. We're starting this thing up real early and getting things underway. And it hurt Juancho a little bit.
I think the one thing working in his favor is that he's historically been the better of the two Hernangomez. And so if you can get the better brother, I do think that is valuable, because I just looked up Willie Hernangomez's stats, and he's might be worse than Juancho. Juancho, I guess, is a little smaller and does more shooting, but yeah.
Willie can play offense too. They can play offense. They're not defensive masterminds. But they're both skilled for their given positions. And Juancho, like, he can shoot. And one thing that a couple of people brought up when I asked around about Juancho is that when he's at his best, like, he's very good at moving without the ball and kind of adding that type of spice to an offense. So it's not just like he's just simply a spot up shooter. He's a guy who has a little bit of gravity and will move around and kind of add some of that to the offense, which I think the Celtics needed that too. Like, some of their spacing last year were guys that were only standstill shooters. And I think Juancho, like, he's going to be a standstill shooter too, but he'll move around a little bit. He knows how to play offense. And when he's at his best, like he was down the stretch of that season with the Timberwolves for a very short period of time, he can be he can be at least a helpful offensive player. So we'll see. We'll see if he fits in. He definitely is what the Celtics need if he is actually a decent NBA player.
Yeah, if he can,
the jury's out.
If he can shoot anywhere close to that 14 game stretch, like if he can shoot, I would say even above 38%, is just like serviceable 3-point shooter. We've talked at length about how this team needs shooting, and especially from the power forward position. It will be a nice little addition for the Celtics, but there is really just no risk. Two not so great players for another not so great player who just happens to be taller. More transactions, because Brad don't stop. Brad's continuing to fill out the bottom of the roster. He signed a deal he signed Juwan Morgan, who I've never heard of, but will reportedly compete for a training camp spot with the Celtics. Jay, tell me about Juwan.
Juwan started a couple games for the Jazz in the playoffs 2 years ago. He's like a 6'7", 230-pound forward who is known for his defense and seems to be like a switchy, versatile type. He could potentially end up sliding into the vacant two-way spot next to Sam Hauser with the Maine Celtics. And he seems like another guy who kind of fits into the mold of what the Celtics needed, which is like a bigger power forward type. I don't know. Well, obviously there's not much space for him on the roster unless the Celtics waive Jabari Parker, whose contract is not guaranteed. And obviously it's just an exhibit 10 contract, which doesn't guarantee Juwan Morgan a spot on the roster at all. But I do think it's possible that he ends up as a two-way guy, and he'll be eligible for a two-way slot if the Celtics want to do that, and if he wants to do that.
I do have to say RIP to the great debate of Jabari Parker versus Carson Edwards. With the trade, where do they stand on current players on the roster? I guess not counting Juwan and Luke Cornett, who they also signed to a non-guaranteed deal. Like, how many bodies do they have?
Let me count. 18, including Sam Hauser, right? And
that sounds about right.
Luke Cornett. Yeah, I think 18.
So they can have 15 going into the season. So unless those guys beat out Jabari, you would assume Jabari is going to be that 15th guy on the roster. So the debate is over.
I would guess they have a competition for that spot. Like, why would you just hand it over to Jabari Parker?
I'm not going to hand it over. Obviously, you bring in these guys, but just given the kind of body of work, the fact that you can like kind of pivot Juwan Morgan to a two-way so you can keep him in the organization. Who knows? Maybe Luke Cornett, the Green Hornet, will show out, but I don't know. I don't necessarily think he did enough to. He didn't do enough to get a guaranteed contract.
He had that one comeback against the Thunder, though.
It was magic. It was a magical moment.
It was a big night for the Green Hornet.
Do you think they when's Jabari's guarantee date? Is it like before, or is it like right before the season? Do they not keep him to keep a spot open for a buyout?
I looked this up last week. I should know it. I think it's the first day of the regular season, but let me check right now.
Because I just think that, and this question comes from Eddie Truth Faustino, who's the de facto segment producer for us, and his many list of questions. It's just like
his salary guarantees the first game of the season.
So it's like whether or not you guarantee that salary, or do you kind of keep that open for
half of it does. Sorry,
a two-way. It's probably not that much money, so they can probably keep him on. And then if the buyout candidate, Jabari's an easy guy to just cut, and you kind of eat that money if there's really someone on the buyout market. But who knows? I don't really know. Like, I think we'll talk about this later when we rank the Celtics. But I don't know if they're really a buyout destination. I don't know which players are dying to kind of go to the Celtics.
There's only 2 buyout destinations, maybe 3 now. It's the Nets, obviously. It doesn't matter if they have roster spots, they'll just add you. What do they have, like 17 guys with guaranteed contracts right now? It's getting kind of ridiculous.
And if you're over 35, you automatically get qualified to be a member of the Lakers.
Yep. And then I still think the Warriors are a buyout spot to watch, because I think they combine. They could be very good, at least if Clay comes back healthy, and they also have chance for minutes. Like you can look at that roster and be like, okay, I can go there and make a real impact.
Now, the Larry Bird Mittens at Birdie Mittens asked if this is the kind of the final evolution of the Celtics roster. I think the roster is pretty much in place going into training camp. We have 18 guys. I don't really see them adding anyone. As we mentioned, the buyout market is it's for 3 teams. I do think it's interesting that they brought in basically the guys competing for jobs right now are Jabari Parker, Juwan Morgan, all basically power forwards with size. If I'm Grant Williams right now, I'm like, there's a little bit like breathing down my neck. Like, what do you think that means for Grant's role moving forward, and where do you think he kind of fits into the rotation?
I think it's pretty obvious that the Celtics have made moves to position themselves to have like a bunch of wild cards at that spot. Like they clearly don't consider Grant Williams like an automatic, or from the moves they've made, they don't consider Grant Williams an automatic part of the rotation. I think because of the texture of their backcourt with not a lot of shooting, it could make it even tougher for Grant Williams. Like, if you're going to be playing Dennis Schroeder, Josh Richardson, and Marcus Smart a lot of minutes, you're going to need to surround those guys with shooting. And obviously Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown will give you that. But I think some of the Celtics personnel decisions will have to be like, okay, we need another shooter on the court right now. Grant Williams isn't necessarily that. If they try to just lean into defense, maybe Grant can carve out a role. Maybe he can just improve because, as a rookie, he showed some promise, I thought. Second year, he didn't improve much, but it was a weird season for everybody. So we'll see. I think he's in the mix with Hernangomez, Jabari Parker, and maybe Juwan Morgan if he shows well in training camp, to play some backup 4 minutes, because I think if you look at the roster, the power forward spot is an obvious, I don't want to say weakness, because you can use Jaylen Brown there, you can use Jason Tatum there, you might be able to use Al Horford there if that still works. But that's a spot where there should be minutes available if someone plays well enough to take that.
Yeah, and I think it's like it's not going to be settled in training camp, is it? Like they're going to have some, like, we're guessing, or I'm guessing right now, it's like Jabari's going to, and Juancho and Grant are all going to be on the roster. There's no, like, I think Grant probably gets the early minutes if, like, for that backup 4 position, but how often does that actually, like, come up without an injury? So, but, like, it might be settled halfway into the season as someone goes out and, like, grabs that role or plays well or strings together a couple of games. I think it really comes down to, like, who's the best shooter or who's the best, like, offensive creator. Like, Jabari Parker's not going to, like, step out and knock down a lot of threes, but we saw, like, he can give you 8 points pretty quickly. I just think it's like that's what the Celtics need the most, I think, from that position. It's just a little bit of offense. And so I think it's really going to be, like, can Juancho shoot or can Grant shoot? Because I just, like, and Grant, I think, is a step ahead of both those guys just because of what he can do defensively, his physicality, his ability to switch, just compared to those two guys. But it's really just like, all right, 40 games in, like, who's provided the best offensive spark off the bench?
And then I think the other variable is how much will they play Al Horford at power forward? Because if he's starting there, then you're not going to need as many minutes for a power forward. But if he's not, and they're kind of splitting minutes between Horford and Robert Williams, maybe Enes Kanter thrown in there a little bit, then that opens up an opportunity for more guys at that spot. I think if you look at the roster, it's clearly weighted more toward guards and perimeter oriented guys and then centers. Like that 4 spot, there's like a void of obvious rotation guys in that spot. It could be Horford, it could be one of those guys you mentioned. It could just be that they decide to play small a lot with Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown there, and then have like Josh Richardson, Marcus Smart, and Aaron Nesmith, or Josh Richardson, Marcus Smart, and Dennis Schroeder. Like there are ways that they could go pretty small on the perimeter without relying on any of the natural power forward types. So we'll see. We'll see. Ime Udoka's got a lot to figure out.
The thing that's interesting about the kind of roster construction is it does tilt more towards, I guess, a smaller lineup, but they have a lot of, like, if we think of the traditional positions, they have a lot of forwards and then they have a lot of point guards. Like, who's their backup shooting guard right now? Like, I'm imagining the second lineup, it's Dennis Schroeder, and then your backup shooting guard is probably Peyton Pritchard, and you've already put yourself at your pretty small team. Like, you can put Romeo in.
Could be they start Al Horford at 4, and Josh Richardson's the backup shooting guard. So a lot of that depends on the lineup decisions. I think depending on who he starts, Ime Udoka can, like, kind of change the entire look of the Celtics. And I do think you're right. Like, there will be times when they have a very small backcourt, when it's Schroeder and Peyton Pritchard, and maybe that'll work. Like, we'll see. They'll have a lot of defensive versatility around those guys. But when you look at it, and it's also another reason why, when you look at the way the roster is built, like, what is Peyton Pritchard's role going to be? Because I think he was obviously very promising as a rookie. And among all their younger guys, he was one of the most consistent, if not the most consistent. And he was pretty important to whatever success the Celtics had last year. But like you said, like, if you bring Dennis Schroeder off the bench, it's just an awkward pairing with him and Pritchard because of their size. So we'll see. We'll see how all that works out. But I do wonder if Pritchard will end up kind of getting squeezed out of things a little bit, just because the fit with Schroeder isn't perfect.
Yeah, it's just
Schroeder's a
interesting.
weird fit. Schroeder is a weird fit.
Yeah, because like when he comes in, it's like when he was the most effective, when he was like sixth man of the year type guy, you like the ball was in his hands, and he's not the biggest person.
It was in Chris Paul's hands a lot. It was in Shai Gilgeous' hands a lot.
When like they down the stretch they did that, but they also gave Schroeder like a lot of times like you're the ball handler now, and so Peyton Pritchard's gonna have to, if he wants to like coexist with him, play off ball. But I think also Peyton Pritchard's pretty good with the ball in his hands too, and you can see like pretty good at creation and getting to the rim. And so I don't know how that's going to kind of figure itself out. The other thing that's interesting about the rotation, I think, is something that also kind of points to maybe Al Horford playing, or at least getting a shot at the power forward position, is I'm not saying that he needs to have a role, but I am saying that Enes Kanter does exist. And as playing like a backup five, he can come in for, even if it's just like 6 minutes a half, and come in and just give you a bunch of offensive rebounding. And like, he's been effective in that role. Like, I know his deep pick and roll defense is bad, but like that is something you can use. And so you don't necessarily need to have Robert Williams be the primary center and then Al Horford come in and be the backup center. You have like a pretty, like Enes Kanter, for all the kind of critiques I've given over the year, is a solid backup center. And you have that option. And so you can more easily pivot Horford to the 4 because you have already someone in that role. And like Enes is an NBA player, like he's ready to play. And so I think that like, I wouldn't be shocked if the starting lineup would be Marcus, Tatum, Brown, Horford, Rob Williams.
Yeah, that won't shock me either. And I do think with Kanter, he's an interesting piece too. Like Pritchard, like there will be, if Ime Udoka chooses to play a certain way, then Kanter could get pushed out of the rotation entirely. But if Horford starts at 4, then Kanter could be, nightly 14-minute guy or whatever the case may be. So that all depends on how Udoka decides to play. And I do think you're right. Like Kanter as a backup center is in the regular season in most matchups is useful. And he's proven that year after year after year that he's highly productive, that, the Celtics a couple of years ago, I think they outscored opponents by 9 points per 100 possessions when he was on the court, something like that. So if you use him in the right situations, and pretty much a lot of matchups in the regular season, especially against second units, are the right situations for him, then he can be effective. And I think also like with the Celtics backcourt, there could be a lot of offensive rebound chances. And Ennis gobbles those up.
So with Ennis shooting, there could also be a lot of offensive rebound chances because that's the Ennis special.
I need a few Ennis threes this year.
That could be fun. I think there's like a lot of pressure on Horford to be able to perform and be like the kind of able to just be at the 4 like he was in the Baines year, like that he like wasn't able to recreate with Embiid. And there's all sorts of different situations why it didn't work in Philly, but he can do it or has done it in the past. I just don't know if he like has his physical capabilities of doing it now. But I do think because of all the reasons we mentioned, it just makes the roster that much more dangerous if he's an effective playmaker next to Rob Williams.
Yeah, and I also think part of that will be who complements Tatum and Brown the best. Like what style allows them to play the best. And I'm not sure what that will be, whether it's surrounding them with like more 33% three-point shooting guards or surrounding them with a traditional front court. Like, we'll see.
Because it felt like Horford was most effective with like Isaiah Thomas and like a ball dominant point guard where he could play at the elbow and facilitate things and you could do pick and pop. But maybe that's not as like useful if he's not providing the kind of spacing that like Brown and Tatum would need to kind of operate. Like, do you run the offense through Horford when you have Tatum and Brown on the court, like just as a facilitator? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see kind of the offense Ime sets up.
And I also think like people are scarred by the Tice Thompson duo last year and
as
how
they should
badly
be.
some of those minutes went. But Horford and Robert Williams is a very different duo. Horford is a much better playmaker than Tice. Robert Williams is obviously far more dynamic than Tristan Thompson. So I think that duo is very different. Will it succeed? I'm not sure. I'm skeptical, actually. But like, you don't have to be afraid of because of the Tice Thompson duo necessarily, because that was a far more limited duo than
the idea
Horford
of
and
two
Robert Williams
bigs should not be ruined for anyone. Like, you can still do that in the NBA, but I do think it's like one of the early season questions, as like everything we're talking about is like kind of what the rotation is. But like the first thing to ask is like, can the Celtics be effective with a lineup that gets a lot of minutes with Horford and Robert Williams? And so that's going to be like the early thing to watch for.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think, to me, when they're going to be at their best is when they build like just long athletic defense. I think their best lineups will probably be like Marcus Smart, Josh Richardson, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, just because I think the defensive flexibility there and the potential for ball pressure and kind of keeping teams uncomfortable, those lineups could be very interesting. Or whenever you have Marcus Smart at point guard, whether it's Nesmith next to him, maybe Romeo Langford if he can improve offensively, like they'll have some options to keep a lot of defensive speed and length and knowledge out there. So I those are the lineups that are most interesting to me. But then the like the Horford Robert Williams thing, if they could play together, that will also open up like different ways for them to play.
They need to find a third, or I guess a fourth option, because I feel like as much as you want to have the Horford Williams there together, I do think there's if Nesmith can step up and be that guy who can give you the versatility on defense and give you something on offense, or Richardson can kind of step in and not be terrible on offense, or in a crazy world, it's like Peyton Pritchard or Dennis Schroeder, and you do go kind of small, but like they're still like effective and high flying around. I just like the ability of like to play. You can either close with like those four guys and Al Horford, maybe if you like the matchup depends, or Robert Williams, and having just the ability to kind of be a little bit smaller, I just think makes them more dangerous. So I think they need, ideally that person is Aaron Nesmith or Romeo Langford. Right now I have more kind of faith in Nesmith to step up, but I do think if one of those guys can be a solid someone you can go to and you trust to finish games, it just makes it so you don't have to rely on that Horford Robert Williams kind of pairing. And you can play, like with Horford, you can play some 5 out. With Time Lord, you can still really space the floor and just run high pick and roll with him. I think that's like probably where they're most dangerous, but for them to do that, they need to have that kind of reliable fifth guy on the floor.
Yeah, I think depending on how the Udoka decides to start, the bench could be filled with a lot of like proven guys. Like, if you think about it, they could have Schroeder, Richardson, and Enes Kanter all off the bench. And those guys were all starters on playoff teams in the Western Conference last season. And Kanter because of injury. But, like, that's very different from what the Celtics rotation was last season. Extremely different, especially before they added Fournier at the trade deadline. And obviously part of that was injuries with Kemba Walker, everybody else. Part of that was COVID, to Jason Tatum, so many others. But like, they should probably feel a little more confident about their depth now than they did last season. And we've seen Brad Stevens kind of trim the fat a little bit and try to get potentially useful players. Whereas I feel like last year the Celtics went into the season with a lot of guys who were like borderline NBA players and didn't have much potential to be more than borderline NBA players.
Yeah,
part of that was they miscalculated on Jeff Teague. They thought he had more left than he did. But
do we blame Danny or do we blame Brad for that? Because I always thought of Teague as like a very much a Brad Stevens guy, but he was not the head of player personnel. But it was a big. I feel like they missed on Teague and they missed on Tristan Thompson, and so they haven't really, like, all the other guys are pretty much proven in the NBA. I guess Thompson and Teague were proven, but they're still a little bit older. But I do agree with you that the bench, they just clearly have more depth. It's just about kind of trying to assemble it in a rotation that kind of makes sense and kind of maximizes especially everything around Jalen and Jason.
Yeah, because they have a lot of like flawed players and flawed in different ways. So Udoka will have to mix and match. I'm curious to see how much experimenting he does, because I do feel like the Celtics will be able to play a lot of different ways this year. They'll have some lineups with a lot of shooting, some lineups with hardly any shooting, some lineups that are small and super fast with a lot of guys who can make plays, some lineups that are much bigger, probably a little bit clunkier, but could work out all the same. So he'll have a lot of different kind of options, and I'm interested to see how much he experiments with that in his first season with the Celtics, and how much he sticks with lineups that don't necessarily work right away. Is he stubborn with that? I feel like Brad Stevens, like, he always gave those lineups a chance for a while just to see if they would kind of come around and learn how to play together. Like, he always knew the numbers, but sometimes he would just keep trying to play lineups, and because he saw something in them that necessarily didn't play itself out in the numbers right away. So we'll see. Udoka.
Yeah, but Brad also, like, I felt like tried a bunch of different stuff. Like, he did kind of go, like, he would try things and then like kind of keep going to it, but he had a willingness to try. It's going to be interesting to see if like Ime is like trying to make it so it's like like this is your role, and like really trying to impart that on certain players. Like Schroeder, you should expect to like come in at the 6-minute mark of every first quarter, and maybe that stability is something that like players want. And so I don't know. It'll be fascinating to see, because we've never really seen Ime. No one's seen Ime coach a game and know what his rotation's like and what his theories are. And so it's going to be just interesting to like kind of see how that develops, and whether or not he's, like you said, stubborn, or he's willing to just throw shit against the wall, which generally I'm for, and obviously fans are going to be for, because every fan on Twitter knows exactly how to run an NBA rotation.
Yes.
They are all experts.
I'm working on like a story predicting the Celtics rotation and what it could be. It is so fucking hard to make lineups that make sense for 48 straight minutes while keeping everyone to like a manageable minutes load. It's almost impossible.
Are you actually like building out the rotations, like where they would go in the quarter, like you were playing NBA 2K?
Yeah, and it's really hard. And so when you're screaming at coaches for playing a bad lineup for like 2 minutes, just know they know way better than you that it's a bad lineup and that it'll probably suck. But they're trying to deal with so many different factors. And sometimes coaches are just make bad decisions. But there's a lot that goes into it. And every time I try to build out a rotation, I'm like, man,
this coaching stuff's difficult.
Coach is no joke.
It's just wild, because you have to manage like yes, who's on the court, but it's also a managing of personalities too, where it's like, are you going to be able to like clearly communicate to the player what is expected of them? And then if like you just have an idea, it's like, oh, this rotation is going to change, and then you bench a player for the rest of the game, does that like mess with their head? Like, there's a lot of things you have to kind of deal with, and like maybe you have to show that you trust a player, so you put him back in knowing that rotation isn't necessarily the best, but like you want that guy's confidence up and like show that you have faith in him. So there's like a lot of different things that go into it, other than just looking up on NBA.com like which 5-player ranking is the best net rating.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot.
All right, to finish off today's show, we are going to debate. I don't know if we're going to debate, because I don't know where you feel the Celtics rank, but we are going to try to figure out where the Celtics are in the Eastern Conference. We can either do this in the athletic cop-out tier method, or we can do this in the hot take. They are definitively above or definitively below certain teams. Jay, I think
we go hot take. Let's go hot take. I bet you didn't expect that out of me.
I didn't. Normally, you do not like to make hot takes. Normally, you're a middleman. All right, start off. Brooklyn, Milwaukee, 1-2 in the East. Anything else?
I think Brooklyn won. Brooklyn clear one. Brooklyn clear one. If they are healthy, they're my one. I know that the Bucks won a title. I know Giannis reached another level during the playoffs.
I know they got Tremont Waters now.
They got mollywopped by the Nets when the Nets were even reasonably healthy. Like they had James Harden dragging around on one leg. They had Kyrie Irving out, and Kevin Durant still almost won that series. So
Absolutely. Nets are the clear one.
I'm going to say Nets are number 1, Bucks are number 2, and then things get tricky.
And it gets a little bit difficult because just on paper, I would go Sixers. But with the whole Ben Simmons situation, it's very difficult to figure out what they're going to be in the regular season.
What are they going to be? We have no clue. And obviously, like Simmons, that situation appears headed for a breakup. So what will they get back? Will they have like CJ McCollum? Will they have Pascal Siakam? Will they have some random dudes from the Warriors or something?
Buddy Hield and the other guy. What's his name?
like what are they going to get out of that trade? Can they keep Simmons and somehow figure things out? At this point, I doubt it. But so Sixers are a tentative 3.
I still put them, even if Ben Simmons comes back, or with I think Morey's going to be stubborn enough where he's just not going to trade him for without getting some solid players back. Joel Embiid, as much as I criticize him for fading in the fourth quarters, my criticisms of Joel Embiid are the playoffs and not being in condition for the playoffs and never getting out of the second round, because people forget Joel Embiid's never got out of the second round. But last year, before he got hurt, regular season Embiid
runner-up for MVP.
Fucking good. And the Celtics could not stop him whatsoever. It's not like they added.
They have more Embiid stoppers now, though. They do.
Al Horford?
Al Horford did very well on Joel Embiid. Cantor, somewhat handled him. And Embiid's a different beast now. He's not the same guy he was 2-3 years ago when Al Horford was doing a pretty good job on him.
And Al Horford's might be a little bit older, maybe not be able to.
Yeah, a little creakier. So, but I think they're a little better equipped to handle Embiid this year.
So he's only going to get 30.
He'll only average 36 and 12 with 17 free throw attempts per game.
Last year was 40 and 20 in every game. And this next year is going to be 30 and 15. So I still think the Sixers are right there at number 3. Who would you have at number 4 in the Eastern Conference? Because I think it's the Heat. Just think they're better than.
I think the Heat could be 3 too. They're in the conversation for 3, even if the Sixers make a good trade. I just think the Sixers are going to miss Ben Simmons. They are going to miss Ben Simmons. He gives them so much defensively that it's going to be hard to approach the level they were defensively without him, no matter who they pick up. So I just think, yes, they kind of need to move on because of how tense things got between Simmons and the other key pieces in that organization last season. But it's tough to envision a trade that they move him and they still have the same strengths. They could get CJ McCollum and have a much better, creator at the end of games.
But they're not going to be the best defense in the league anymore.
But yeah, what happens to their defense in that scenario? So we'll see what happens with them. I would actually lean Heat 3, Sixers 4. I just think the Heat, and there's a chance the Heat goes wrong, right? Because they're old. Kyle Lowry is aging. But I just think they have a chance to have an unbelievable defense. And then they have Lowry, Jimmy Butler, Duncan Robinson flying around screens, shooting threes, Bam Adebayo. There's just a lot of talent there and a lot of guys who know how to play the game. So, and a lot of tough, gritty guys. So I'm high on the Heat this year.
Yeah, it's pure Kyle Lowry respect for me. He's just been a very solid point guard, and he's the guy you want making decisions, the ball in your hand. In his hand, I think to surround him with Butler, Bam, who are just you would presume is just going to continue to get better, and then to have Hero, Duncan Robinson, and guys like that running around. I think it's just going to be a very solid team. I don't really get the PJ Tucker signing. I don't think it is going to be that's the best fit for them. But I just think if you're talking in terms of, because is he going to play in the fourth quarters? Are you Then you have Jimmy and PJ Tucker on the court and Bam. You basically don't have a lot of the spacing.
Bam.
It's going to be a very good defensive.
Kyle Lowry shoots a lot of threes. Duncan Robinson's one of the best three-point shooters in the league.
You can't have three basically non-shooters on the court on a playoff defense. I just don't think it works out that well. Maybe, I mean, the Bucks just showed that you could, but I don't think anyone's on the level of Giannis. But PJ Tucker's a bench piece.
And you could also go with Tyler Hero in those lineups and have a lot more scoring and a little different texture. But to me, like, they just have a ton of toughness. And PJ Tucker, like, they needed another Jay Crowder type, like somebody with the size to guard forward. I think they missed that last year. They tried to get it with Trevor Ariza, but
he's not going to be able to knock, like, the beauty of Jay Crowder is that he can give you that size and that toughness, but also, like, knock down
PJ
5
Tucker
threes
gets
in a
hot
game.
sometimes. Don't let him get hot.
He rarely gets hot.
Now,
if we were doing the tier methods, I think we just went through tiers 1 and 2. Now I think is where the East gets very interesting, and you could go in a whole number of different directions. Because I'm an ultimate homer, I think that's where the Celtics are. And I think they're better than the Knicks and the Hawks and anyone else you would have in that discussion at the moment. I think the Hawks are a good story. I think the Hawks very much lucked out from being able to play the Sixers in the second round and kind of had a complete Sixers meltdown. But I don't necessarily believe in the Hawks moving forward, purely because I just believe in the Celtics more. But I think the Celtics have kind of on paper like the same amount of talent as the Knicks and the Hawks right now. And I would say more top-end talent, just because out of those three teams, I think Jason Tatum's clearly the best player. And then I would say Trae Young, and then Julius Randle, and then I would go probably Jaylen Brown. Like, I think they have the majority of the top-end talent, and that's usually what wins basketball games.
Yeah. No finish from those three would surprise me. And there's a lot to figure out for the Celtics. Like, a lot of it is just theoretical right now, whereas we saw the Hawks reach the Eastern Conference Finals. We saw, and the Knicks will be different. Like, the
Knicks are going to be wildly different.
They had an awesome defense, and then they added Kemba and they added Evan Fournier, and so I think obviously their defense won't be the caliber it was last season. How much of a hit will that take? I don't know, but Walker and Fournier give them a lot of offensive punch that they needed last season. How much can Kemba play? Who knows? How much can his knee handle?
Is Julius Randle's season last year, like, was that just the product of him being the only offensive option? I don't know if I fully believe in Julius yet. Like, he's done it for basically 1 year and got the big contract. I wouldn't be shocked if he did it again, because he clearly was very consistent all throughout last year, but he was the main option on that team. I just don't know if he's going to be able to put up the same numbers clearly. And I think his usage rate is going to go way down when you add Kemba, when you add Fournier. And those guys, like the Knicks, kind of were a bully ball team last year, where it's like, we're going to beat you 92-88 and just like play really tough defense. Kemba and Fournier, not known for their defense. It wouldn't shock me, but I just think the Celtics would, we've mentioned all the things they have to figure out, but at the end of the day, it's just like, you have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who are still young, still very talented, and are getting better each year they've been in the league.
Yeah, I think I put both the Hawks and the Celtics above the Knicks. I think the Knicks are due for some regression defensively, and I'm just not sold that Walker and Fournier will give them enough offensive power to justify the drop off that defense will probably have. I also think a lot went right for the Knicks last season.
They're going to be doomed by expectations. It's going to be a classic thing where it's like, oh, they made the playoffs last year. They were a top 4 seed. People are going to, and they got these two kind of big names. People are going to come in and expect big things from them, especially Knicks fans, because Knicks fans are some of the most irrational in sports. I think it's, we've seen teams like the Celtics. It's kind of, how do you deal with kind of expectations being so high? It doesn't normally go that well, especially when it's not like they added amazing talent. Like, Kemba is solid, but flawed. And maybe Tibbs will just run him into the ground, but Fournier is not a huge star. So I don't know. I don't think I would agree with you. I think the Hawks and Celtics are better. You have to pick one now. Who do you think's better, the Celtics or the Hawks?
I'm picking Celtics 5, Celtics 5, Hawks 6, and then I think I would have Knicks 7, but I do think the Hornets and
buddy, that was going to be my
the
next
Wizards
pick.
and the Pacers, like,
no love for the new look Bulls.
Oh, the Bulls too. Yeah, the Bulls. I really don't love what they did, but they got better.
They did add talent.
Yeah. So the Bulls, I think, will be. I'm gonna go Bulls 7.
Ahead of the Knicks?
Knicks 8. Wizards 9. Hornets 10. But the order of the last 4, and then the Pacers too, who would be 11th. I could go either way on those. I actually think the Wizards got better. Like they traded away Russell Westbrook, but they got Dinwiddie. They got better depth, especially at areas they needed with Kuzma and KCP. So,
and Thomas Bryant only played 10 games for them last year, and Thomas Bryant was like very solid big man the year before. I think if they can get if he's their starting center for the majority of the year, they don't have to rely on the weird 10 minutes of Daniel Gafford. I just think it makes a lot more sense. I think the Wizards are up there. Again, completely biased. I'm going to go Knicks 7, and then I think Charlotte Hornets. They're just sources close to the situation saying they might be making some promotions from player development coach to assistant coach, and that might be in the works soon. I think they're going to have a much improved offense.
Where are the Raptors?
Raptors are not. The Raptors are – I would put them on the same level of the Pacers. I think the Hornets – I agree with you. Hornets, Bulls, Wizards are kind of playing around for that 8 seed, 8, 9, 10, but then right below then is Pacers and Raptors. I just don't believe in is Pascal – I don't have any belief in the team that says Pascal Siakam is your best player. Or is Fred VanVleet the best player on the Raptors right now?
Simmons could change his conversation too, because he could get traded to the Raptors. If he goes there, that changes things for them. Definitely raises their floor. So I think the Raptors, they still have a number of good NBA players. If they stay healthy, I wouldn't be shocked if they're pretty good. But yeah,
they are going back to
Toronto.
Toronto.
They're in that 9, 10, 11 conversation, I think, at this point, until proven otherwise.
The East, the point of this exercise is that the East has gotten much better just in terms of depth and no longer is the cakewalk conference. I don't know. Do you think the East is better than the West this year? We've seen the West kind of dominate over the past, what feels like 20 years. Do you think just overall talent, which conference would you think is better?
I think the West is still just really tough, man. Now they have the Warriors. They're loaded up again. The Grizzlies were the 8 seed. They're very young and should be better.
If the Pelicans can do anything with Zion, they're still.
Yeah, Luka's only going to grow. The Clippers are still loaded up. Although Kawhi is going to miss time, obviously, maybe even the full season if he's out for the full season. But then you got Phoenix, Utah. The West is pretty loaded. The East is definitely way better, though. Way better than it has been. And with, I think, a number of teams that have a chance to win a title, with Brooklyn, Milwaukee, and I would throw Miami as a fringy title contender if everything goes right for them.
Or were you the source on Tim Bontemps' secret survey of NBA GMs? There was one guy who was it's going to be the Heat. The Heat are winning it all. And it was just clearly Pat Riley, because Bontemps and Pat Riley have a pretty close texting conversation.
The source was not me, because I do not expect the Heat to win a title. But I do think if everything goes right, they're going to be a very tough out. I think the Nets will win the title. If they're healthy, they're gonna win.
That's kind of the crazy thing is we can talk so much about what's going to happen next season, all the different things that changed in the offseason. But if the Nets are healthy, they should be absolute title favorites. Like Kevin Durant ruined the NBA again. It should be like when he went to Golden State the first time. Like there should not be a question of who the best team in the league is. They have Kevin Durant and then also have MVP James Harden and then also have Kyrie. It's absurd. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but they have Joe Harris. They have a lot of other guys that are very
Bruce Brown
players. Patty Mills. Don't forget about Patty.
Oh, I forgot he went to the Nets.
Yeah, I knew you forgot about Patty. So they have a whole lot of offensive talent.
That they do. All right. Thank you guys for listening. That's going to do it for us. If you enjoy the show, please like, subscribe, do all the things podcast folks tell you to do. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Shout out to the people watching us live on YouTube right now. Hang out in the comments. If you say something interesting, we'll probably put it up on the screen.
And pray for Packard. Pray for Packard. Sunday when we play one-on-one, it's going to be a very, very tough day for him. So just pray for him. Pray for him. If you want to go watch us play, Langone Park, 2 p.m. in the north end of Boston.
It sounds good. Be there, be square. Is being tremendously out of shape potable?
Yes.
Anything is potable!